Hi, I'm Jan.
And I'm Tracy.
And we are the last day on our back-to-back NCL cruise on the NCL Sky in the Eastern Caribbean.
We have really enjoyed our time on the NCL Sky.
Yeah, there's many things we really love about the ship, but there are a few things we notice about NCL that have changed about since the last time we were on NCL since the pandemic, which was not as great.
Now, we believe that cruising is a personal experience.
Let's go.
And different people have different perspectives and experiences on a cruise. So these are just our observations and thoughts of our cruise.
So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at some specific categories, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take an opportunity to tell you what are the top 3 things we liked about the NCL Sky and the top 3 things we didn't like quite as much.
The categories we'll be looking at is the ship, our cabin, the service, the food, the entertainment, NCL's excursions, and the overall back-to-back experience.
Now we're going to first start with the general impressions of the ship. Now remember though, you've already been given, we already posted a tour of the ship, and if you haven't seen that, go on and look. It should be a link at the top right-hand corner of the screen.
One thing to remember that the NCL Sky, along with the NCL Spirit, it is one of the 2 oldest and smallest ships in the NCL fleet.
Yeah, and this age and the size of the Sky, it really is apparent in the architecture of the ship. For example, while we did not have a standard balcony cabin, we noticed that instead of having sliding doors like we have here in this suite or what we have in newer cruise lines or cruise ships, what we found was it was a swinging door and just a porthole, which really kind of shows the age of the ship.
You will also find that unlike on the newer ships, all the bells and whistles aren't on the NCL Sky. They didn't have the water slides, they didn't have the go-karts.
Now on many of the other newer ships, what we also found is on those newer ships, the atrium really is the focal point and the central hub of the ship, and it is also as a venue for entertainment.
We just felt that the Sky's atrium was way too small to serve in this capacity. And while there was a bar and places to sit, it wasn't a place that you could support a large number of people.
Yeah, but there are a lot of really nice places on the ship.
I think one of our favorite places on the ship was forward on deck 11, and that was the Spinnaker Lounge.
Yeah, we love the Spinnaker's floor-to-ceiling windows facing over the bow of the ship, and there's plenty of comfortable seats to sit in and relax, and a great bar.
So if you are willing to give up the bells and whistles, the small size of a ship is also a plus. With a capacity of just 2,004 passengers, there really weren't that many crowds.
Yeah, except for the buffet and around the pool as usual. But we're going to talk about those in a moment.
So the small size is also a benefit when you are in port. So unless there's another ship in port at the time, the places that you are visiting don't see overwhelmed like they sometimes do when you are visiting from a ship with more than 4,000 passengers.
Yeah, this is really a benefit when you go to the Great Stirrup Cay, which we're talking about. Now, we were also fortunate that our cruises were not full capacity. The first cruise was only about 1,800 passengers, and the second cruise was just over 1,600. In addition to the design of the ship, though, the crew do a great job of keeping her in great shape.
You will always find a crew member up there keeping the place spotless.
Yeah, it really is a well-maintained ship. And what about our cabins?
Well, on this back-to-back, we were unable to get the same cabin for both weeks. So for the first week, we selected an aft suite, and for the second week, we traveled all the way to the front of the ship and we had a forward suite.
Now, between the two, we enjoyed the aft suite much, much more. It was kind of a true suite with a separate living room and a separate bedroom.
And the living space was much more comfortable to relax in than it was in the forward suite.
Plus, the balcony on the aft cabin swept around the side of the ship, which actually gave you much better views off of the ship.
The decor, while well maintained, seemed to be a little bit dated and hadn't really kept up with the interior design that we've seen on the newer ships.
But of course, this is where we made our biggest mistake. We violated a cardinal rule of cruising, which is always to make sure that when you're selecting a cabin, you have cabins above you and cabins below us. We didn't do that.
So our aft cabin the first week was on the 10th deck, and that put our room right below the great outdoors, which is the outside buffet area.
Yeah, we knew this was the case before we got on the board, but we thought we were early risers, and we really didn't think that the moving of the chairs was really going to bother us.
And that actually really didn't bother us.
Yeah, what bothered us was the first night at 2:30, we heard the maintenance crews scraping metal on metal doing maintenance above us. And once we were awake, it was almost impossible to get back to sleep.
So we did talk to our concierge about it, but once again, the next morning, right around 2:30 in the morning, the scraping started up again. And although it was a little bit not as noisy, it did keep us up.
Now, fortunately, after another call to our concierge, we really weren't awakened at 2:30 for the rest of the cruise.
But one thing that you should be aware of with any aft cabin is that there will be more vibration than there are in other places on the ship. And while it wasn't a problem for us, it could be a problem for others.
Yeah, and of course, when the ship is maneuvering, either coming into port or getting ready to leave port, you're certainly going to feel the vibration as the ship is maneuvering.
Then there was the forward suite.
Yeah, the forward suite really didn't have a separation between the living area and the bedroom. There was only really a curtain that actually separated the two.
However, there was a separate bedroom with 2 small bunk beds and a pocket door, which would make this a suite perfect for a family with small children.
Yeah, but the biggest problem we had with this cabin was the balcony. While it was large, it had 2 nice loungers and 2 comfortable chairs and a good-sized table. The problem was the forward wall actually obstructed your view. If you were sitting down in the loungers and the chairs, you simply could not see the ocean. And that is about the only reason why we actually ever get a balcony room in the first place.
And because the room faced into the wind, if you happened to open up your balcony door when the cabin was open, it created a very big wind vortex that blew throughout the entire cabin.
Yeah, and while we will definitely have an aft cabin again, although we'll be more mindful to make sure that we're in between other like floors with other rooms, I don't think we will ever book a forward cabin again. It just wasn't worth it.
One of the other issues that we found confusing was the electrical outlets on the NCL Sky. So by comparison, last month we were on an MSC Preziosa and there were plenty of 110 and 220 plugs. On this one, the Sky, we only had one 110 plug and everything else was 220, which we were just baffled by.
Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of European 220 outlets on both of the suites, but almost no 110 outlets. I think, like Tracey said, it was like 1 or 2. This is incredibly odd, as NCL is a cruise line that pretty much caters to Americans, so we didn't really kind of understand why that was the case. So what about the service?
Well, we thought that the service was fantastic. Our room stewards, the butler, the concierge, the waiters, the bartenders, everyone was extremely energetic and friendly, and they tried their hardest to make sure everybody had a good time.
Now, the one thing is we've noticed this on the previous 3 cruise lines that we have had since the pandemic, and it all had the same situation. These are crew members that are working hard. They really want to serve you, but the cruise shortages on the ships really is impacting service.
So for example, we were at the bar, the Great Outdoors bar on the 12 aft, and we watched the bartender. He was just working his tail off, 4 to 6 drinks at the same time, and he was the only bartender there. And because of that, it just took a long time to get drinks on the back of the ship.
Yeah, and we also noticed that the wait staff, although they really wanted to give us the best service possible, really didn't seem to know how to anticipate needs or ask the follow-up questions that would have allowed them to serve us better.
Now, this isn't anything unique to NCL. We've seen the same phenomenon on Carnival, on MSC, and on Viking, and this has been an issue since post-pandemic.
So we actually believe this is something that's going to continue to improve with time across the entire cruise industry.
But then there was the area that we were deeply disappointed in.
Yeah, and that's the food. This really was disappointing, as we have really always really enjoyed the food on NCL. And while we noticed on Viking and MSC that the food was good but really didn't knock our socks off, the food on NCL Sky's main dining rooms, it just wasn't good.
We actually dreaded going to the 2 main dining rooms, which are crossings in the palace.
Yeah, now we had a couple good dinners there, but there was one dinner that I simply didn't eat because it just didn't taste good. And that's really the first time that has actually happened to me on any cruise line.
Remember, we love NCL. It's the cruise line that we have cruised on more than any of the other lines, and that's why this was really disappointing and unexpected.
Yeah, another disappointment in the food was on what the ship calls the local. This is the complimentary pub-style restaurant that's on board, which on other ships is really what, if you remember, Ocean.
Now, in terms of service, this was the one place that the service was really, really slow. And although there were several servers and bartenders, it seemed a chore to actually flag somebody down to order. And then we had to wait a long time for the food. And more than that, the pub food really wasn't as good as it had been on the other Ocean type pub things on NCL ships.
Yeah, now fortunately we could eat at other places other than the main dining rooms or the local, and we ate a couple times, usually for breakfast at the buffet or actually the great outdoors, where the food was actually fine.
The only problem with the buffet was it's a way too small, and the ship, it was a one place in the ship that was really, really crowded all the time.
And then there's the great outdoors, which is the outside buffet at the aft of the ship, was not nearly as crowded, and we loved the space. What we loved about it, that was covered, so you're always covered from, had protection from the rain or the sun.
And this is where we did eat our breakfast on those early port days before the other restaurants would open up.
Yeah, and speaking of restaurants, as suite guests, we actually had special access for breakfast and lunch to be able to eat at Cagney's.
And while we were very disappointed with the main dining room meals, we were very delighted with the breakfast and lunch options that they had at Cagney's.
Yeah, now speaking of Cagney's, it's a specialty restaurant. We ate at each of the 4 specialty restaurants on board.
So Cagney's is usually one of our favorites. And while Jan enjoyed his steak, mine was far too seasoned.
But honestly, the best steak we had on board was actually at Le Bistro, which is the French restaurant on board. But I will note that although the appetizers we had at both Cagney's and Le Bistro, they were just kind of average in our opinion.
So for the Italian restaurant, we did go to La Cucina, which is a specialty Italian. It was fine, but nothing remarkable. It was a step up from the main dining room.
Yeah, however, here's a pro tip. Between noon and 3, La Cucina serves complimentary pizza, which is actually pretty good.
So the last specialty restaurant on board is the sushi restaurant called The Pinnacle.
Yeah, we actually paid to eat here one day for lunch. It is open for lunches, I think usually on sea days, and we really found it to be pretty good.
So on 2 nights of the cruise during this back-to-back, we took advantage of room service delivered to our room. And one of the advantages of being a suite customer on the Sky is that if you order your room service through your butler, you do not have to pay the $9.50 service charge.
Yeah, more than that, the room service food, although it was pretty simple fare, was actually pretty decent. Then there is the entertainment.
So like we mentioned at the beginning, there aren't the bells and whistles on the Sky that you have on other ones like the go-karts and the water slides.
Yeah, but it does have a couple pools and it has a few hot tubs, and here's where you find that kind of poolside entertainment that you can find on most other mass cruise lines.
And just like most mass cruise lines, this place, the pool area, is the one place next to the buffet that is always, always, always very crowded.
Yeah, also for entertainment, we did take time to be able to take in some of the shows in the ship's theater.
So you won't find large-scale productions on the NCL Sky, which is what NCL is known for, but most of the shows that we did see, they were okay.
Yeah, now in the evening, the ship's band would play at one of the lounges on board, and they are absolutely outstanding and may actually be the best band that actually we've seen on a cruise ship.
And of course, much of the fun on this ship was going on the excursion.
Now, while we booked one scuba day with an outside vendor, we broke with what we usually do on a Caribbean cruises, and we actually booked several excursions with the cruise line, and we were really glad that we did.
In St. Thomas, we took advantage of the ship's diving excursion.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, when we first got onto the dive boat and we saw there was over 30 people, I really thought, okay, this is going to be horrible. But I'll tell you, the dive masters and the captains was incredibly responsible, incredibly professional. They did a remarkable job of splitting everybody up into groups. So really, we were only diving with groups of like 6 or 8, which really made the dives enjoyable.
We actually enjoyed the dives in St. Thomas so much that we signed up for the same dives the second week as well as the first.
And then on the second week in the Dominican Republic, we did the waterfalls and the private beach excursion.
After hiking 45 minutes up to the waterfall, we either slid or jumped into the waterfalls.
Now this is pretty rigorous. The 45-minute hike up to the waterfalls is uphill and rather tiring, and the jumps at the waterfall are certainly not for everybody. Now don't get us wrong, it really was a fun excursion, and we do it again, but this is certainly an excursion where you have to be aware of your own physical condition and truly be truthful about what you're actually able to do. Now, the good news is that after we got done with the waterfalls, we all went to our restaurant for lunch, and the food was actually included in the excursion, and then we had some time at the beach, which was way more relaxing than hiking up a hill and jumping off the waterfalls.
Moving into the British Virgin Islands, we went to the Virgin Gorda baths. This was the only bad side of this one, was we had to be off the ship and ready to go on the excursion at 6:45 in the morning. And then after a 45-minute ferry ride, we were taken by trucks up to the Virgin Gorda Baths National Park, and we walked onto 2 beaches which were surrounded by volcanic rocks. And then we were able to enjoy the water, and then we got to go hike and squeeze through little rock areas to get to the cave.
It was very, very cool. All right, then there is the Grape Stirrup Key, which we really, really enjoyed. And we were only unfortunately able to actually go to it the first week, because the second week, which is actually the day we're actually filming this, the wind conditions actually meant that we actually could not tender in. So it became a sea day, but it really was great.
So we had been to Great Stirrup Key prior to the pandemic, but now that the villas are done, it is really, really nice.
And more so, even better than that, to our very pleasant surprise, they are not near as expensive as we thought they might be.
You can rent a villa on the Great Stirrup Key, in the lagoon or the ocean area, for $399 for 4 people for the entire day. If you have your free at sea promotion, which most people do, you're really only paying about $350.
Now that might go up depending upon when you're actually viewing this video, but that's the prices for right now. But not only do you get an air-conditioned villa with full bathroom and a living room, the villa guests have their own separate restaurant, which is not bad, and then they have their own beautiful beach to enjoy for the day.
And they also get your own floaters for free, which are $20 per floating.
Yeah, you're really taken care of. Now, as we said back at the beginning, this was what was known as a back-to-back cruise, which means we actually did 2 7-day cruises on the NCL Sky in a row.
If you have to be changing rooms like we did, you obviously have to pack up your clothes, but you do not have to put your suitcase outside. We simply packed up our stuff, put it on our bed with our new luggage tags, and then the crew took them down to our rooms the day that we had to get off of the ship.
And on that morning of the port, we got into our port, our concierge came and actually exchanged our key cards. So we had the new key cards for the next suite. Now, if you're not a suite guest, what you'll do is you'll go to guest services and you'll get your new key card.
Of course, if you're not changing rooms, you obviously don't have to pack up anything, but you will have to get a new key because you have to close out your old account from the week prior.
Yeah, now in Miami, due to U.S. immigration's rules, they need to clear the ship, so you will have to disembark the ship. And we were asked to meet in the Bliss Lounge with all the other individuals who were doing back-to-backs at 9:30, and then all of us were escorted off the ship and into the terminal and the waiting lounge there, and we were there for about 90 minutes is all, and then we were escorted back onto the ship to begin another week of fun and relaxation.
Let's go to the things that we want to talk about. We're going to look at the 3 things that we liked and the 3 things that we didn't like so much about the NCL Sky.
All right, so we'll start with those things that we didn't like as well, and the first is the food. As we noted earlier, the food simply wasn't nearly at the level that we have grown to expect from NCL. It was far below the 3 other cruise lines that we have sailed on since the pandemic.
The second disappointment was the forward suite. It might be fine for a family, but really didn't feel like a suite. And although it was large, the balcony was really disappointing because you really couldn't watch the sea when you were sitting down.
Yeah. Now the third issue really is kind of a combination of the two, which is the value. The forward suite just wasn't worth the money that we paid for it. And while the aft suite was nice and what you would expect for a suite price, the food really just simply took away from the value of that room, or quite frankly, any other room. I mean, quite frankly, when you're spending that type of money for a suite, you shouldn't have to find yourself trying to scheme how you're going to avoid having to go to the main dining room that night. So what did we like?
Well, undoubtedly it was the crew. And while some of the crew are still learning their roles and they were short-staffed, everyone really did try hard to make sure that everyone on board had a great time.
Now, the second thing that we really liked surprised us, which was the excursions. Now, while some of these were physically challenging, they really were well organized and gave us some unique perspectives of the destinations that we were visiting.
Plus, our excursion manager, Ina, was great. We cannot say enough great things about her. She was so helpful for us, especially when we had to change our itinerary the first week because we had to redo all of our plans because our itinerary changed from the Western to the Eastern Caribbean.
Yeah, now while many people really, one of the things that people love about the Sky is the smaller size, for us, the third thing we really liked was Great Stirrup Cay, even though we were only able to visit her one day.
So this might be cheating as it's more of an excursion, but the beauty of the island and the beauty of the beaches along there, and then the value of the villas is really one of the things that was the highlight of our cruise.
Yeah, so that is our review of the NCL Sky back-to-back in the Eastern Caribbean. But the good news is this is not the only travel we have. Like I said earlier, we are literally going around the world. We would want you to come with us. So do us a favor because it helps the channel. Go ahead and hit a like to this video, and then go on and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll not miss any of the travels that we have. And as always, keep on traveling.
You've got to do it faster than that. I can't see that far.
Goes right here.
Okay, do it again. Do it again.
See what I'm working with.